better than girl talk? Girl talk, girl talk. What's better than girl talk? A chat with the ladies about their day, the ups and downs along the way. She's a cook, she's a chauffeur, she's a worker bee. First in the door and last to leave. Girl talk, girl talk. What's better than girl talk? Girl talk, girl talk. What's better than girl talk?
Welcome back to Girl Talk. Our interview with Jamie McLeod Skinner, who is running for Congress in District 2. In the second half of our show, we are going to be taking questions from our live audience. So, you out there in audience land, if you have a question for Jamie, please come up to the mic and address it to Jamie, and we'll try to answer as many questions as we possibly can in the next 30 minutes. So who? Okay, we have a person willing to come up here.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi.
You just made a list of all of the things of why you can win because of your experience, having family in the district, and you went down the list. But I've seen and heard you several times, and I know that you hold transparency, honesty as high values. Could you talk a little bit more about your personal ethics and talk a little bit about that for us and how that ties into all this?
Well, thank you so much for that question. I really appreciate it.
Welcome.
Rebuilding the public trust is a key part of good governance and good service. And it's something I've always believed in very strongly. So ethics in government, making sure that people believe that you're listening to folks. We talked about listening earlier, that you're responsive to your constituents, that you're accountable to your constituents. But also, government has gotten a bad name, rightfully so, because our government has not been respecting our constituents and people in our country. And it's very important to me that we rebuild that trust by showing respect to and for voters, and also holding ourselves to a higher standard, being accountable as elected official. It's something that's always been important to me in elected office, and it's something that will be critically important to me in Congress, because Congress has very low regard by most of the country. But that's because, one, Congress hasn't been serving our country well. We have some great examples of folks in Congress. I won't take that away from them. But we also have folks like our Greg Walden, who I don't think has been showing the respect he needs to our community. But holding ourselves to a higher standard is a key part of public service and rebuilding that public trust. And it's something I believe in very strongly. And I've been willing to put myself at risk because of it. The transparency issue, making sure people understand how their public money is being spent. And then also being accountable, showing up when people, to tell people why you voted a certain way and what your thinking was. All that's critically important for people to understand your thinking as an elected official, but also to appreciate that you're safeguarding and honoring that trust they put in you to serve them.
Another question?
Hi, Jamie.
Hi.
So when you win this election in November, you will be, I believe, the first woman elected to our congressional district.
Yes.
So between now and then, what leads you to believe that a woman can win this election?
We have a tradition of strong women in our district, and it is time, after 125 years, for a woman to lead and to represent our district. The reason I believe it's possible is because you're seeing, in like the opening segment, you saw all sorts of women stepping forward and being leaders in our community. And I'm seeing throughout our district a real hunger for that type of leadership, a hunger for the ethics and quality and the understanding of the issues, but also for more and more women want to see women lead. Men as well. Folks throughout our communities want to see women lead and look to that style of leadership. To solve the problems we need to solve in Congress, we need to be able to work collaboratively. You need to be able to stand firmly with your values and in your beliefs, but also to reach out and work collaboratively with others. And that's something that I think women often bring to the table, and it's a style that women bring. It's how I got a lot of stuff done when I served on the city council before and was very effective using that style. And I think it's not only something that people respond to in when I'm talking to folks throughout the district, but also I believe it will represent good governance.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Jamie.
Hi.
I'm very excited you're running.
Thank you.
I know you're going to win. When I became a naval officer, I raised my right hand and said, I will defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That's right.
And when you raise your hand, you will be doing the same thing.
Right.
So I've concluded, after watching the Office of the Presidency for now a year, that we have not just a foreign, we have now a domestic enemy. And so if you think about it in those terms, I'm asking you, if you were right now in office, I can see that you have, I hear that you have the right ideas as far as communicating and talking, not being so partisan. What would you be doing as a congresswoman right now to talk about, you may not buy what I say, but I have come to the conclusion we do have a domestic enemy.
I have taken that same oath of office, and that would be the oath I would take again. Accountability is what it comes down to. And I honestly don't care what someone's party affiliation is. If you are serving your community in an elected office, you should be accountable to your constituents. As a congresswoman, it would be part of my responsibility to make sure we are holding our president accountable. So I have seen things and heard things that I believe raise questions as to that accountability, to your point. What I would do is I would be very active in making sure there was a process that we went through to be able to hear both sides of the argument, to have a fair due process. And if we found and concluded, had the conclusion that we had a domestic enemy, that we would take the steps necessary to take him out of that role. But that was, due process is important, but also accountability is critically important. And that's true of the president, that would be true of me as well, and that's true of all our elected officials.
Thank you. I concur.
Thanks.
Hey, Jamie.
Hi.
Thank you for having the courage to run.
Thank you.
You mentioned that Oregonians care about their families and communities, and I think we also deeply are concerned about our natural resources.
Yeah.
Our clean air, clean water, clean soil that make Oregon so livable.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what your thoughts and strategies are about preserving those natural resources.
Thank you for adding that to, yes, that's something that I should have been mentioning as well. Thank you. So we, in Oregon, we have a tradition of, we have a long history of enjoying and being connected to our natural resources. I believe that stewardship is a key role in governance, and so making sure that we are able to pass along to future generations what we have, that we protect the precious resources that we have. But I also think that we utilize and share our public lands. So I think protecting our public lands is important. I think public lands need to remain public, and we need to work in partnership to protect the critical resources we have, be they endangered species, be they some of the special studies that are going on or research being done in certain areas, and that's actually an issue more regionally. And also, though, that we to some of the open lands, and we have a lot of public lands. Oregon is actually over 50% public lands, that we utilize those lands and maintain them and balance them with folks who are using them. So I mentioned having folks in my family who are in ranching. Ranching and forestry has been part of our tradition, but we need to be sustainable. So we're seeing politically, we've seen one extreme or another, either overutilization, cutting down all our trees, or running our rangeland into the ground. That's not acceptable. We need to maintain our resources for the future. But having some shared use when it's a low impact, that makes sense. Or our forests. If we have some thinning of our forests so that we reduce the fuel level, protect our old growth, but our forests that have been managed and have been harvested over years, that we thin the forest, so we maintain forests, but we also have some of those jobs that could go in to thin the forest, and then also in that it provides jobs. It also reduces the fuel level that's in the forest that will result in the forest fires that we saw this last year. And that's been, when I've heard from forestry folks, that was a lack of long-term management that was going on that resulted in some of the fuel loads that helped to lead to the fires we're having. Fire is a natural part of the cycle, but we can throw that cycle off if we're not utilizing and having some of the traditional practices we have had to manage our resources. So my view is really, in general, our natural resources, they're critically important to us, but we also need to look at managing those resources. The other piece of that is climate change. And so renewable energy is really important. We have all sorts of opportunities throughout our district. That's economically great for creating good paying jobs, but also that we're transitioning from fossil fuels to renewable energy. And that is also important for our district and for our world, our globe. And that's something that we've also had a failure of leadership with our current representative. He has, because he's gotten a lot of money from, he has focused on supporting fossil fuels and dirty fuels and not been supporting the development of renewables in our district. Thanks.
Hi, good morning.
Hi.
Hi. As you mentioned, Greg Walden and the Republicans recently enacted this tax cut that primarily benefits the wealthy. And as a result of that, there's going to be, well, there's projected to be huge federal deficits. And as a result of that, Paul Ryan and the Republicans are talking about the need then to cut benefits for Social Security, Medicare, and other things. So my question is, if you get into office, how do you deal with that type of atmosphere where they're always talking about cutting benefits for people that really need the benefits?
Yeah, that was the other piece that I didn't yet mention, that it was the concern of what's going to happen when we have the $1.5 trillion deficit and used as a leverage to start cutting those benefits. So I anticipate that there's going to be a backlash in 2018. And I think there's going to be an opportunity for a lot of progressive-minded folks to step into office. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I'm finding throughout our district, even in really traditionally red areas or Republican areas, folks are concerned about losing access to some of these benefits through the Farm Bill, food stamps. We've got a lot of folks who need some of these resources, retirement that you mentioned, healthcare. These are all things that folks throughout our district and throughout our country need. And so it's focusing on the issues and the things that we need in our country, building the partnerships in Congress to get a majority of folks to develop legislation, bipartisan legislation, to meet these needs. I think a lot of the folks you've seen, the Washington Republicans, and I distinguish those, the Washington, D.C. Republicans, I distinguish those from the everyday Republicans that we have throughout our district. Because the Washington, D.C. Republicans have been focused on giving giveaways to people, to corporations and big business and the wealthy. The rural Republicans throughout our district and districts throughout the country are folks who are being hurt by that. And folks are starting to see that. And so I think there will be opportunities to build up the coalitions necessary and the relationships necessary to establish legislation to fight back against that. I think we're seeing a tide. And you're seeing, in the opening segment, we saw a lot of women progressives being elected around the country. You're also seeing a lot of conservatives now stepping down. Orrin Hatch just recently. And so I think a lot of the Republicans who have been pushing this have realized they've gone too far and the backlash is coming. And so I think those opportunities will be there to turn around some of this and bring in better policies. One of the policies that I think and things I've been talking about is rebuilding our infrastructure. And I talk about both our physical infrastructure and our social infrastructure. Our physical being things like transportation and housing and internet, because we're in an information age. Our social infrastructure being things like education, healthcare, and also security. And when we have those kind of investments, we're also helping to drive the economy. But a lot of those ideas and a lot of those concerns are things we can build coalitions around. And I think we can, I think with a lot of hard work throughout the country, we can turn the tide and get us headed in a positive direction so that we're taking care of our communities.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Hi, Jamie. Thank you.
Thank you.
My question is, it appears to me what is likely to happen is that Mr. Waldman is going to have a lot of money behind him, and it's going to be a rather ugly election. And I'm wondering what your specific strategies will be to be able to fight some of that.
Sure. A couple of things. One is we are raising money. We anticipate we'll probably need about $1.5 million for the entire election, probably about a tenth of that for the general. For the primary. And he can he will be able to raise a lot of money, and there will be some vicious attacks. That's okay. We don't need the money, we need the votes. And I think there is support and growing support throughout the district to replace him. I've heard that not just from Democrats, from independents, from Republicans as well. People are tired of his lack of focus on the district. People, again, across party lines, feel he's turned his back on our district. And it's that motivation, it's tapping into that that's going to be key. So it goes back into that strategy, that 20 county strategy of building up those relationships. I don't need to outraise him in money. I need to beat him and vote and get more votes than him. That's all I need to do. And the motivation is there. And we've seen community groups build up, groups like the Indivisibles, folks even outside traditional party lines, progressives across our state who are rising up and saying, no more, we're tired of it. And it's about people getting motivated and then also coming together to rally together around a candidate and prevail. But he, and on the attacks, I mean, I've been there before. With the 49er Stadium, when I ran for re-election, I got all sorts of hit pieces against me because I had the audacity to ask the tough questions. And I had the audacity to say we should focus public resources on our community and care first for our constituents. And I had a lot of hit pieces against me, but I also won my re-election overwhelmingly, cross-party lines, because people want elected representatives who are focused on and care for our community. So we'll be raising money, and I want to encourage people, if they're interested in supporting my race, McLeodskinner.com is my website, so please go online and support. But we will be raising money. We just have to raise enough. So let's not get intimidated by how much he's going to raise. And I've also seen the more the hit pieces come, the more frustrated people get because people see what he's been doing. So I think we'll be okay in that regard. And then the one other thing I'll say, and this is specific to actually being on Girl Talk, is I've been in forums where people will say, "Are you tough enough?" Funny enough, is the only woman who's been running. So I'm the only one who gets that question. I don't know why. But I will say I'm the only one who has been in elected office before and understands how tough that can be. Mm-hmm. I'm the only one who went into a former war zone before to work for a humanitarian organization when I went to Bosnia, when I went to Kosovo. I'm not afraid of going into the tough spots to do the work that needs to be done to build up our community. I mean, that's the only way we build strong community. We've got to be able to and willing to step up. And I've got a lot of folks that I've looked to in my life who've had the courage to do that. And I'm just one in a long line of women or people of color, people in general, who have had the courage to step forward. Those are my mentors, and I'm just doing my bit along the way.
I've got a follow-up question on that. You mentioned earlier that Carol also ran for this position. That was in 2006. And I happened to be her campaign manager. So we were a great team. We had a lot of fun out there. And so one thing that I recall being very important is to build that field organization. Yeah. And you're talking about the relationships. So you've got 20 counties and you're only one person and a few core people. So where are those people coming from? How are you getting them engaged with your campaign? How are you making that happen?
Those people are stepping forward because they want to see Walden replaced. And they want to see him replaced with someone who can do the job well. And so as I've been going throughout our district and talking to folks, talking to community groups, talking to at schools and colleges, talking to Democratic clubs, talking to progressives, talking at county fairs, people have stepped forward and offered to volunteer and say they want to help me get elected. And so we're building up that core team from there. I have some paid staff. We have kind of a traditional campaign, but also we will rely heavily on those volunteers, because to the question about resources, the more folks who step in and volunteer, the less money we have to spend, and we can really target those resources that we have. So we've built relationships throughout the district, and we're putting together those teams and to get the word out, and then also to turn out the vote, both for the primary and the general. But that's why I've been working so hard. I've been driving my Jeep around the district, I think in the putting thousands of miles in my Jeep. I've actually lost count at this point how many thousands of miles I put in my Jeep. And actually, my family invested in a small teardrop trailer because I was spending so much time on the road. That's become my mobile bedroom and office, essentially. And so while we're based in Terrebonne, we're based in Central Oregon, I'm spending a tremendous amount of time on the road. But it's showing up, it's being present, it's listening, and it's helping to, it's also helping to bring hope to folks. You know, we were in Klamath Falls at a talk just a couple days ago, and there was a room full of people, progressives. It was a great group, had some great questions, and it was at a local restaurant, and I kept noticing that the waiter would come in, and after he'd serve people, he'd hesitate before going out, and he kept hesitating longer and longer. And afterwards, we finished the program, everyone left. He came up to us afterwards, to my wife and I, and said something about the race, or asked about the race. And I said, well, tell me about it. You know, I'm happy to hear it. He said, oh, yeah, I've got a lot to say. And for the next 15 minutes, he just poured out his heart. And he talked about his fears for his kids and their future, and how much he was struggling, and how much we need to bring hope back into our communication about public service and about our government. And it was incredibly inspiring. But I've had conversations like that with folks throughout our district, and people want to see someone step up who cares for them, who gets it, who understands some of those personal issues, and who's willing to really fight for them in a strategic way. So not just going to Washington and fighting to argue with people, but going with a core set of fundamental principles and figuring out a way to do it and to solve those problems in Washington and do it strategically. And that's what I'm committed to doing.
That's wonderful, Jamie. We have time for one more question. Anyone want to step up from the audience, please? Okay.
Thank you for being here, Jamie. I'm an RN. I was very interested in the feedback you're getting from all over the state about healthcare, and that they are worried about losing it. I know that you said you didn't like buzzwords. You wanted ideas and to come together on that. But I do find that people are busy. People have jobs they're trying to hold down, maybe multiple jobs, and sometimes I've seen the GOP use buzzwords or ideas in a way that allows them to have the person hearing it stop thinking about anything. But how are you going to get the young people involved, the people that are working such long jobs, to be able to focus on believing that you can fight for the health care for them, and that they can talk about a common idea with very little language?
Yeah, and healthcare is such a critical issue, and it's a huge issue of concern for young folks, as you mentioned. Those who are even under their family's coverage, when that terms out, a lot of folks can't afford it. Friends of mine can't afford it, people I know. So the 4 ideas I mentioned before about everyone having access, controlling costs, and the quality of the service, and then also care for the caregiver, are ideas that shy away from those trigger buzzwords that shut down the conversation. And they're ways that can really help, especially across party lines, to get common agreement around those ideas. Now, when we do a drill down in some of those ideas, like controlling costs, for example, people will say single payer. Well, if we go to single payer, we will save 25% of our costs right there. And so that then becomes some of the drill down conversation. And so folks who are very wedded to certain ideas or certain topics, we can get there in the conversation. But the point I try to make is those core ideas. When you're talking about engaging younger folks, this is something I've been talking to high school students, I've been talking to college students. More and more I'm finding younger folks do not have an affiliation with one party or another. They tend to be more independent minded, or rightfully so criticize some of the flaws of both parties. So I think more and more the message of ideas and quality of public service, of hope, and also providing opportunity for students to move forward and engage is something that has been really resonating. On the issue of college opportunity, I've been talking about kind of the equivalent of a GI Bill of public service for education, for a free education, but it's public service. So students are not only gaining work experience, but are able to engage and do some of that work as well. That's something that's resonating with young folks. But to the issue of healthcare, again, it's a concern throughout the district, because even folks who have traditionally are Republicans and independents, this is something that affects all our families. And so it's a great core issue to talk about, because it's something that resonates for all of us. I've got a story I often tell about a woman in Gillum County, so a very small county up in the northern part of our district, who's been a lifelong Republican, has always voted for Walden in the past, will not vote for him again in the future. And I met her when I was at the county fair in Condon. And her number one issue is health care, because her mom has Alzheimer's. And so she spends every day after work, she'll rush to help her dad with help care for her mom. They've had to put their family farm on the market in order to provide for her mom. That farm has been in their family for 3 generations. Now, yes, the ACA, there are gaps still. There are things we have to do to provide better coverage, better long-term care and coverage. But it is unconscionable to me that in the wealthy country that we live in, that we have families who are driven into bankruptcy because, and healthcare, access to healthcare is the number one cause of bankruptcy in our country. That we have families driven into bankruptcy, give up their family tradition, their family farms, because they love their family member and they want to care for them. That is unconscionable. We're better than that, and we can do better than that. And that's something that people are rallying around across party lines. And those are the connections we need to make. And the point I like to make is that we need to do that not just to win this election and not just to win elections, but to really serve our communities better. That's what governance can be. When we talk about good governance, let's be serving our communities. We've had, people are turned off to governments for what they're seeing out of the White House and what they're seeing in Washington, D.C. right now. Let's rebuild the pride in our democracy and in our governance. If we do it well, we will rebuild that public trust and that public respect. And that's what I'm committed to doing, and that's what I want to do in Washington for the 2nd Congressional District.
Very good.
Is that your closing statement?
Yes.
So we'd love to thank our live audience.
Thank you
You
all for
really energized the program, and we'll have to think about having more live audiences in the future.
We also want to thank Jamie McLeod Skinner,
Thank you.
candidate for the 2nd Congressional District, for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for the work you're doing for hosting me. And I also really want to pay tribute and thank my family, because they're with their work and their sacrifices, they're allowing me to do this full time so that I can really do the job to win the race. So my wife, my kids, they're supporting me, and I greatly, greatly appreciate it.
And we want to thank our outstanding crew, including our director, Wanda Borglund, as well as our camera people. Thank you. You're doing a great job. We really appreciate it. And so we hope that you will tune in to RVTV and to our program, which Regina will tell you when you can see it.
Yes. In order to access this program, you go to roguevalleytv.sou.edu, and at the top of the page there will be a public access link, and then you go and all the programs of the programmers that create these shows for our community are there, and you search on Girl Talk. And this is our 29th episode. And so it's been a great 2 years. And I also have another show which is called Getaway Girl. It's a travel show. And you saw that, the home audience saw the clip that happened during our break. So you could also search on Getaway Girl. So those are 2 programs that you can go to. And we're also on KSKQ.
Oh, KSKQ. Don't forget KSKQ, our local community radio. We have a Girl Talk. We're on tomorrow at noon. So this is all the time we have. Thank you all, our audience especially, for being here. And we look forward to seeing you in the future. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Girl talk, girl talk. What's better than girl